Hello and welcome to another one of our short videos. This one's specifically on stretching and specifically for hips. So what I'm going to show you today is exactly how to do two of the easiest stretches to do, because there's a lot of them that we would cover, but to keep it simple, I'm going to show you two of our most effective stretches that we use very specifically with a lot of knee pain and back pain people, and in terms of sports performance, very much for the same reason, to try and get the most out of the posterior chain. So I'm going to quickly just rip into how and why, but basically like to ensure that you have really good movement skills. Understand that tight hips will create back pain and knee pain pretty much 100% of the time. So without good mobility through the hips, creates a chain reaction of problems. Basically, firstly, you sort of, because the hips aren't moving, which is what they're meant to do, the spine is then forced to flex itself either into flexion or extension to make up for the fact that the hips are not doing it because they're so restricted. For people who have too much mobility in the hips, this is also a problem, because that's when you sort of get the clinking and clunking feeling, and there's a real weakness in the leg, and that creates a different problem altogether. But that's probably less of the case than maybe about 10 to 20% of the cases we may see. The majority of people generally have a lack of flexibility, most likely caused from sitting too much. That's the number one reason, and you can understand there's a lot of people like that these days. So, all right, so we know that the spine flexes too much to make up for the fact the hips aren't moving. All right, now if I go down below the pelvis, and towards the knee, I start to have problems at the knee because the quads become so tight, because they're also hip flexors as well as knee extenders. So that when they start to become excessively tight, and they will also start working really hard, it then creates a lot of problems where you can't get full flexion of the knee. So when the knees needs to go into full range, it can't get there, and you start getting problems. You start getting patella tracking problems, and it just goes on and on and on. But understand, in both cases, the tight hips create weak glutes because they're inhibiting them from working, and the glutes become more and more lazy, which then creates these problems to become bigger and bigger. If you don't have pain, then you're just maybe not as effective in the sports or the activities that you want to do, and pain is just around the corner for you. All right, so how long do you stretch? When's the best time to do it? Best time, always make sure you warm up first, by the way. Don't do stretching on a cold when you're cold. It's why they're not effective first thing in the morning. You're much more wise to try and warm up, as opposed to just stretching straight out, even though it's what you feel like you want to do. It's more effective to just try and warm up the area, by just doing some movement sort of activities, as opposed to holding long stretches. I find it's way more effective if I do it late at night, holding the stretches for long periods of time right before I go to bed. This will improve flexibility quicker than just doing more stretches. You only need to do them once a day, but if you do them at night, there's a better chance of them working, just for the fact that you're not going to do anything to stiffen them up for the next 8 hours while you're asleep. All the muscles go very, very relaxed while you're sleeping, otherwise you wouldn't be able to sleep. So it means that the muscles have a better chance of remembering to have a new range of motion, because they're being left like that for hours on end, as opposed to a minute if you did it in the morning. A minute you'd stop your stretch and go back to doing what you're doing, it goes back to the way it was. So PNF stretching, more effective for the quads. That's the contract relax method. There's videos we have on that if you want to look up those, how to do those. Static stretching I find more effective for the hip flexors, and like I said, I'd like to hold them for 30 seconds to a minute. Foam rolling is much more effective for the ITB, as you can see a picture of me there doing it. Okay, so I'm going to quickly show you our two stretches. Both of these are taken from our videos that you can get, that are the extended versions, either on knee pain or the back pain, and you can go to our online shop to get those. So, all right, let's have a look at these two videos.
Next 4 tests that I'm going to show you. So this first one is like a rotational type test. So what we want Kate to do is slowly sort of roll over, keeping her knees together, and I should see that she keeps this shoulder flat on the ground. All right, now Kate's pretty good. She's actually quite stretchy, so it's not a good example, but if she comes back, What I commonly see with tight hips is when someone goes, you can tell that they're very tight because their arm comes off the ground, or they just cannot keep the shoulder there. So firstly, it's maybe tight pecs, but more often than not, it's tight hips. And it's the tight hip that may be the problem all along that's creating the problem through the knee here. So the knee is usually not the problem. It's either from this end or from this end. And there's usually something that's too tight, restricting things, creating weaknesses throughout the chain that's now putting the knee in a really bad position. So hence that's why we would use this test to find out, is there a problem through this hip area? All right, so I'm going to flip her over now and we're going to do the next one. And basically this one we're going to test like what we call knee flexion, or her quadriceps and hips. So she's quite stretchy through here as well. And basically we want to find a point where she tells me that it's reasonably tight. Yep. So it's about there. So we can use like a little goniometer, and I can get this and I can measure the angle exactly where I want it to be, and that'll give me a reading that I can compare versus ideal range and where she should, or where her current range is. Commonly we'll find people with knee pain very, very restricted, and you'll start to see tension around about here or even there, you know, like I have had some people here. All right, so once you sort of lose that, you become very quadricep dominant through every single leg movement, which is bad because now the glutes become even weaker. So you can see what I mean? So here where these tonic muscles overworking quads, and the phasic muscles of our hamstrings and glutes are now starting to become even more and more stretched out, less and less used. The dysfunction just becomes greater and greater and greater, and everything starts to change. So the first step is always addressing these flexibility imbalances and then going from there.